Shabbat Shalom, men. Praise Yahweh. Welcome to the Sabbath afternoon workshop class. If everyone would please lift their hands, we'll open with prayer. Most holy and righteous Father Yahweh in heaven, this is Kohan Kanath Hawkins, a seed of your anointed servant Yisrayl, and by and through the authority of Yahshua Messiah, the great, the most honorable high priest and our soon coming king. Asking and praying, Father Yahweh, that you would receive us in prayer as we open up this Sabbath workshop class. On this, Father Yahweh, the seventh day of the week, the holy Sabbath day, the 22nd day of the 12th moon of the donkeys, as we look forward to the upcoming Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread. We pray, Father Yahweh, that your inspiration would continually be upon each and every one of us as we're educated in these great laws of life. All in Yeshua's name we pray, as the seed of your anointed servant Yisrael, being guided by Spirit Holy. Hallelujah, Yahweh. Praise Yahweh. Please be seated. We're going to continue in the 12th book of Yisrael, part 2, entitled Menorah. We're in chapter 5, found on page 35. This sermon was given in the 8th Roman month of the year 2012, the 11th day of that month. It's entitled, "The Microorganisms That Make Up the Firmament Are Sick from STDs from Mankind." And, you know, as we go through this lesson and this sermon that our great teacher, the great Kohan Yisrael Abel Hawkins has given unto us, you know, you'll see the way that he breaks down, you know, how sin has caused this problem that the world doesn't know how to deal with. You know, they see that the firmament, or as they call it, the atmosphere is depleting and deteriorating, but they don't understand why, you know, and that's what our job is to teach mankind that the breaking of Yahweh's laws, which causes sin, is the reason for this. So we'll go ahead and start there in verse 2. The pastor says, the question that the world is asking is why? And this is the whole mindset of the world. They can't figure it out because they don't have the words of the House of Yahweh. Why would these things be going on? What's the answer for us? Well, they have none. Yahweh has the answer, but they don't want it right now. But one thing about it, at this time, the drought, the violence is increasing, along with the sickness and disease and the drought. It's all burning together, sickness and disease, and it's finally got the attention now of the whole world, especially when they start saying prices of food is going to go up. And he talks about the rises in the prices of food at that time. And we see that this is just a continuation. We see this still even taking place today. In verse 3, Pastor says, I'm glad it's getting their attention because this is what Yahweh wants. Yahweh wants you and I, of course, he's wanting the world to know what they're bringing on themselves. And this is a great lesson. Everything is for our education so that we can go out and teach mankind the true way to peace. Now, Pastor goes on to say, they chose to rebel against Yahweh's laws, and of course Yahweh said, okay, go your way, and I'm going to show you what your end will be. And if you drop down there a little bit, Pastor says this is the 7th work that he has going right now. The last work, and in Revelation 10 says when this work is accomplished. And of course that's Revelation 10:7 if you're taking notes. Then the great secrets of Yahweh spoken of by Daniel the prophet will be finished. And this is the time frame that we're in right now. Okay, and we're the finishing of that great planned work which is given in Genesis. I will make man in my image and after my likeness. And of course, that's Genesis 1:26. Pastor goes on to say the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, as it's referred to, scientifically proven now that it's caused by man. Speaking of this global warming, the droughts are caused by man. The global warming caused by man. Now remember now, this sermon was given in 2012, and Pastor's book, The Real Cause of Global Warming, was published in 2017. So 5 years later, this was all when the groundwork was being done, he came out with that book. Now, continuing on there, Pastor says, some flesh-eating bugs, you get them around the warm water. We could start getting those anywhere and everywhere because they're breeding and mutating. And this is what you've got to keep in mind. And why are they breeding and mutating? You know, it's because of sin that causes these mutations. Now he goes on to say, this is what's occurred, and it's going not only just in the earth and the water, but it's going into the atmosphere, which is the firmament. And a pastor goes on to say, the firmament that Yahweh made to protect and feed the earth, feed mankind, protect mankind, give him just enough sunshine, just enough rain, but not too much rain. Everything is governed by the firmament. Why? Because Yahweh put those microorganisms in a place to assist and actually nurture mankind and the earth. Everything is governed by the firmament that comes to mankind. We've got to have those things from the sun, the moon, the stars, and the firmament. And later on, Pastor talks about how even the universe is involved in this, because remember, sin has risen up through into the heavens. Okay, now in verse 7, well, Pastor says, he, meaning Yahweh, has set kingdoms, billions of micro kingdoms in the firmament to govern this just as things are according to the laws of Yahweh. When I first brought that out in 2007, they laughed at us, and many of us remember that interview with Nancy Grace. He says that STDs are causing global warming. Ha ha ha, referring to making a mockery, a pastor with it. Scientists that come in behind us, and the articles are dated, I believe, in 2008, which was just a year later, and now they're saying the same thing that Pastor brought out to the world, being inspired by Yahweh. Yahweh sees now, the world sees now that it was another power that brought it about. Now, Pastor goes on to say, he's reading an article here entitled, Microbes Make the Best Climate Engineers. And of course, that was put out in 2008. The name of the person that authored it was Fraser Cain. He's a climate engineer, Pastor says. Now look down at verse 9, Pastor says, with the rising threat of global warming, now he's reading this out of this article, you'd think humans are the best or worst climate engineers to arrive on planet Earth. But you'd be wrong. Tiny microbes have been modifying our climate for billions of years, and unless we learn how to work with them, so see, they know that they have to work with these microorganisms, but they just don't have the knowledge to understand how. Okay, and unless we work with them, continuing on in the article, let's see here, we could be fighting a losing battle to get our greenhouse emissions under control. And Pastor, he laughs and says, hey, we've been telling you this all along. These micro kingdoms, that's what we brought out in the first articles that we put out in 2007. Now, Pastor goes on to say, he says, meaning the author here, in fact, unless we deeply understand how these microbes do their work, we might be fighting a losing battle to control climate change. And I look further down, Pastor says in verse 11, they know what we put out is the truth. Well, where we got ours was from the great wisdom of Yahweh, who made the earth, put mankind on it. He gave him certain laws to follow. He created the firmament also, and he made it for mankind to take care of mankind. And it's only the house of Yahweh that has this knowledge that has brought it forth to the kingdoms on the earth. Okay, now if you look further down, Pastor says, Yahweh told us this in Genesis 49. And up in the next column, how man's violence would increase in this time period. And you could see even since this 2012 time period here, it's even increased more rapidly. How man's violence would increase in this time period, how their minds would become confused because of the STDs. And the STDs, of course, are also fighting against the very microbes that are in our firmament to protect it. And they have found these STDs in them. So you can see, like what Pastor is showing here, it's the sins of mankind that has created the STDs that are actually mutating these microorganisms where they cannot do the job that they were designed for. That's it in a nutshell. Okay, flesh-eating virus. This thing can enter your flesh. They'll be taking off your limbs to try to stop it. That's the world's way of trying to correct the symptoms. It works really, really fast. It's made from STDs. It lives out of the air and out of the water and so forth. It attacks microbes of any kind like the STDs do. Okay? Now he goes on to say in verse 15, what is taking place in the micro kingdoms right now of the firmament is the mutations can't do the work that the original microbes were designed to do. And then right in that earlier verse, in verse 14, Pastor says, they attack those cells, the cells within our bodies that Yahweh created in order for us to have a healthy life. The original microbes were designed to create raindrops and to make those raindrops fall in a fashion slowly where it would water the earth, okay, without floods, without great floods. You know, and even if you think in the morning, like this morning, it was very, very foggy and hazy, that dew covered the entire earth, covered this area here. Down in verse 16, Pastor says, the scriptures Yahweh gave in Genesis, he put man to guard the universe, the firmament, the earth, the firmament, everything that goes with making life for mankind. He put mankind to guard it. And remember there, he mentions the universe in there. And of course, what Pastor goes on to say in a joking way, I know it's like putting the fox in charge of the chicken house. And of course, the chickens are all going to all disappear along with the fox. You know, it's a great analogy that's going to take place. Everything that mankind has and has created is going to be destroyed. You should remember that like that now. So take note. You've got to remember this because Yahweh is teaching this lesson so you will never forget it. And the ones he's calling right now can be in charge of bringing back the earth as it was and the heavens and the universe that has got so sick. The universe is sick itself, as we will find out. Go down a little bit, Pastor says, that's our job, and that's what we're training for at this time. And in Matthew 24, he goes down in verse 19, he reads verse 7. He says there's going to be famine, speaking about Yeshua, talking about the famines and a drought. We're seeing drought that is spreading. It's spread over 87% of the United States. The heat wave is doing the same thing. Going further down there, he talks about this flesh-eating virus and the fact that it grows, and what they have in place to stop it is just to cut the limb off of that person. And like what Pastor says, it still doesn't stop it, because it's got into the blood system. Pastor says the universe, if you can think of the firmament as a man's body, if you think of that as one unit and these things are spreading, in other words, thinking the universe as a man's body, where one sickness comes in, it affects the entire universe. He's given like an example there. Now in verse 24, the prophet said the mountains are going to melt with fervent heat. Of course, talking about the nuclear wars. And then in 25, he talks about famine, disease epidemics. It's all because they've broken the laws of Yahweh. And then in Matthew 24:12, and because iniquity in this time period, it did that along with the knowledge and the increase of knowledge that was given to mankind. Now Daniel prophesied this together with Yeshua. Look down in verse 27, Pastor says, iniquity is pushing aside, ignoring, rebelling against the laws of Yahweh. That's what iniquity is. Now look down in verse 30, he says, but he said in this last generation, in the end time, this iniquity will abound, and the love of the many will grow cold. This means the violence is increasing as we see it today. Although this is quite a bit of time later, we see that violence has gone rampant, and they have no handle on this, neither in the United States or in any country in the world. And of course, he mentions that Daniel and Yeshua prophesied these things. And in verse 31, look, he's in Matthew 24:37, as the days of Noah were, so will also be the coming of the Son of Man. The days of Noah, Pastor says, you can read it in 6:11 through 13 in Genesis, violence, evil continually, the increase of knowledge led to the invention of the television, the computer. All of these things have come down to our time. Mankind, his knowledge has increased. He should be civilized by now, shouldn't he? Should he not? Pastor asked the question down there in verse 33. Could you predict what is going to take place tomorrow? Mankind cannot predict this. And then down in verse 35, Pastor says, well, now they will not admit the cause of this. They won't never admit the cause of it. They don't think that, they don't understand that the cause of this is all sin. But they will, and Yahweh says they will, and that's when they are going to turn to him. Now he goes to another article here, speaking that it's all man-made, as Noah links extreme weather to climate change. And if you'll remember, this is when they first started talking about extreme weather in the way of global warming. And now today you see it's all referred to as extreme weather conditions. The global warming, Pastor says, it's man-made. Now go down to verse 39. Pastor says in there it's about a lake in Oklahoma. The drought continues. The relentless type of heat, and of course this is out of an article here, the relentless type of heat that has blistered the U.S. and other parts of the world in recent years is due to man-made global warming. A new study from a top government scientist says. So you could see after Pastor brought this all out, the scientists picked up on it, and then once they started looking into it, they can actually prove what he said scientifically. But do they have the answers? Not until they actually start keeping and practicing the laws of Yahweh. Okay, we put that article, Pastor says, out in 2007. In 2008, the scientists started saying, you better get to know these microorganisms in the atmosphere, or you're going to be in trouble. In other words, they're starting to acknowledge it, but they don't really know how to solve it. Okay, and in verse 40, Pastor says, now this one, along with this, and remember what Yeshua said about the disease epidemics. And if you go down in verse 41, he's in another article here where he says, West Nile virus prompts public health emergency in Dallas County, and that's right here in the state of Texas. Okay? Has killed 9 people already. That West Nile virus did not come from mosquitoes. We need to read that again so we can understand what Pastor is trying to get the world to understand. That West Nile virus did not come from mosquitoes. It came from men whose bodies were screwed up with sin. Once we understand that, then we can see these things. And in verse 42, we'll go ahead and close here in verse 42 and turn it over to the next speaker. And verse 42, Pastor says, now in understanding what Yahweh made, when he made the firmament, this comes from the National Geographic News, rain-making bacteria ride clouds to colonize the earth. And then down there at the bottom, Pastor says, we showed how the firmament was made up of microorganisms. Now they call them bacteria that cause or that ride the clouds. So my time is up. If everyone would please stand, I have the great opportunity to pass it on to the great Kohan, David DePass Hawkins.
Please be seated. So we're going to continue on in this chapter. The microorganisms that make up the firmament are sick from STDs from mankind. 8/11/2012. So continuing here from where the Great Khan left off in verse 46, it says, but they're forming your rain. That is, they used to form the rain and your snow for you. At a time period, they could cover the earth, keep it green and beautiful, with flowers growing. The thing that you will see come out over and over again that Pastor is stressing is that the earth is defiled, and the microorganisms in the earth can't handle what we, the humans, are giving it. So it's pushing it out, it's pushing it up to the firmament, and the firmament is also saying we can't handle this. Okay, so it's that dysfunctional cycle that's going on, leading to all the problems that we're seeing in the environment. It went on to say here, the seed is rotten under the soil, but that's what it takes to teach man a lesson that you can't commit sin and have peace and joy and love and health and, yes, riches and wealth. You can. But he hadn't been able to pinpoint their source till now. Continuing in verse 48, in the recent study, Krishna, talking about the same study that the previous Gahan was talking about, and colleagues found that critters, interestingly, this is what the term pastor used as well in verse 49, critters hail from snow, from soils, etc. Yes, they live in your soil. The things they do for your soil to work and keep it clean, these critters, as they call them, they actually go down into the soil and they work in it constantly, pushing out some of this stuff that we put into our soil. It can't be used in any way by the earth. It can't be reused. It can't be made into a usable substance. So they push it out into the air. Like you breathe air into your lungs. This air cleans a certain portion of your body, gives you oxygen, which also cleans your blood. Sweat takes it out of your body, but so does the air. Well, what does the firmament, which is made of bugs, critters, what do they do with it? How do they clean it? And Pastor then goes into, he mentioned something like functioning like a black hole, okay, to get rid of this stuff. But he's not saying it's a black hole, is what he says, okay? But it's functions like one. And then he acknowledges there are so many things that we don't know that we will soon know. And he said it wouldn't surprise him that these things are actually written in the scriptures. We just haven't discovered it yet. He went on to continue quoting from this article. The bacteria in verse 51 may be part of a constant feedback between these ecosystems and the clouds. And you might remember from your days of geography the cycle of rain as it is evaporated and then condenses and then come back down and so forth and so on. That you can now include the bacteria in that cycle. You see, they never included the bacteria in that cycle. In verse 52, it says the ecosystem that he used here, the word ecosystem, he says the bacteria may be part of a constant feedback between these ecosystems and clouds, meaning making it usable, making the vapors into raindrops, letting them come back down on the earth, taking salt water out of the ocean that is separating the salt from the water. How does it do that? Well, we know it does it, don't we? And we know that it's taken up to the firmament and something turns it to raindrops and gives us feedback on it over the land that grows our crops and flowers and so forth. Now this system works and they call it an ecosystem. The ecosystem is a community of organisms and is an environment functioning as an ecological unit. Did you get that? Now you think about what it takes to take water out of the ocean. Always a great supply of water in our ocean. You know why? Remember, Yahweh set the bounds on the ocean. And don't go any further. You come this far, don't go any further. Unless, of course, something disrupts that and you have a tsunami. Okay? In verse 55, he does a slight comparison between organic and conventional. He says here, they had a recall on apples. This past week, tons of apples. It's got more poison on it than the health department allows. You won't see a bug. And when he says you won't see a bug, that's conventional. Okay? With the regular pesticides, etc., etc. I think I would rather see a bug. They're telling me the things I can't see here will actually kill me. I think I'd rather see a bug, and that's organic. That would be more on the organic side, that I could pick out. Someone said they'd rather see a bug than have a worm after they took a bite of an apple, but they don't get sick. It didn't kill them. The worm was only eating the apple. he doesn't have a carcass, so it was just made up of the apple he was eating. That's the reason insects such as this are not unclean. That is most of them. And no, that doesn't mean we need to make a meal out of worms or anything like that. Let the worms do their work. They have a work to do. Well, you understand that this is a system now, and they agree now that this is an ecosystem that works together to do this work for you. He says this is sending ripples through the atmospheric science community, and it's like another way of saying it's sending shock waves, you know. But you see what they're doing here. This article was published in a journal, a scientific journal, right? But it's not being published in the mainstream media to where they make policy. They use it to push policy and so forth and so on. It's not being published in the mainstream media. It's being published in the scientific journals, which the regular Joe on the road don't read the scientific journals. Okay? The thing that they're pushing on the mainstream media is global warming through barbecuing something in your backyard. Okay? That's the type of global warming they're pushing. They're not seeing here where the bacteria and where the information is coming out, and proving and showing where the bacteria and the microorganisms within the firmament is not functioning well, and it's being invaded by STDs, which is like a natural predator. Okay? It's a natural predator of the microorganisms in the atmosphere. And they're not explaining that in simple terms so that the population will understand, hey, we need to get a hold of this STD thing. We need to practice righteousness, okay? And the environment will work for us. They don't want that information to get out there. Let's jump down to verse 60. Verse 60. Isaiah 24. We see that the earth is being emptied, made waste, and perverted. And the priests, it's going to be upon the priests, the religious systems, because they have done away with the laws. All religions of the earth. And if you notice, with this global warming thing, how the Pope is a big pusher of it. Okay? And he's pushing he's not pushing the notion, the understanding here coming from the microorganisms. He's not pushing that. That's not what he's pushing. Okay? Because that goes back to our behavior. You see? And that's not what they want to be put out there. All religions of the earth today, except the House of Yahweh, commit iniquity. That's doing away with the laws. Only believe or not believe at all. The land will be utterly emptied and utterly plundered, for Yahweh has spoken this word. The earth mourns and fades away. The world mourns and fades away, and the haughty people of the earth languish. Now, this word earth here also refers to the firmament. And the Hebrew word here actually refers to the firmament and the earth together. In verse 64 it says, okay, the earth also is defiled under the inhabitants of it, because they have transgressed the laws. Transgressed the laws. Well, that's what all the religions are doing today. They're saying you don't need to keep the laws. Every single one of the other religions. That's what they teach when it comes down to it. Okay? Of course, they're all on a path to heaven. And listen to their confusion, the way Pastor put it here. As they claim that's their reward. That's what they want to do. They want to die and go to heaven. But they don't want to die and go to heaven. but they want to die and go to heaven. You understand what he's saying? You know, they want to die. They don't want to die to go to heaven, but when they die, they said they're going to heaven. So why don't you just die and go to heaven then? No, you don't want to die. Heaven was never promised as a reward for the righteous anyways. You know what the promise was? What was the promise? What was the reward? Righteousness. Righteousness, yes, the work of Yahweh, which is righteousness. Praise Yahweh. And with righteousness, true righteousness, then all these things will be given unto you, as Yeshua said. Seek the kingdom of Yahweh and his righteousness. First, he says, first, and the rest will be added to you, because they have transgressed these laws. The earth is defiled. They're breaking the laws, and what they're creating in their own bodies is entering into the earth. And STD Creation 101 is right here in verse 66. It's like a woman's body. And the toxicologist was speaking of and said here, a woman has a second relationship. She says the body goes into confusion. The toxicologist from University of California, she says the body goes into confusion, trying to identify this. And of course, that you're talking about adultery and stuff like that right there. They're trying to identify it to where it could be used and harmonized with the rest of the body, but it does not bring harmony, she says. The body goes into confusion, and she said, this is the toxicologist, this is what causes cancer. This is what causes cancer. Then there's another thing here. It says in verse 67, that's adding to all of this confusion here, in addition to the STDs. It's called pesticides. They cross it, mutate it, and they build up a poison that nothing can deal with. It's trying now to push it into the atmosphere, the firmament, and say, we can't handle this. Here you deal with it. You deal with it. Well, they can't deal with it either. So the firmament can't deal with it either. You know, and they get on their telephones, this is the Okie way of explaining it, and says, give us some help down here. We're hurting. We're sick. All of our ambulances are busy. What does that sound like? It sounds like the news that we've been hearing about COVID, right? But this is what Pastor saying is going on in the microorganism world. And it's the same crazy and confusion that's going on in our world too. You see? We're sick. We're sick too. These are the kingdoms talking to one another. Micro kingdoms. Imagine that, because this is what's going on. They're in confusion like the world. You see? And it's really interesting that, Pastor must have thought about this a whole lot, because, that's exactly what's taking place. Confusion. The same confusion that we see among the people here at this time. Everyone's hand is against the hand of his brother. This is what's taking place with the micro kingdoms in the firmament and in the earth at this time. You can't see it, but there are wars going on right now in the earth, trying to fight off what man has created from his uncontrolled lust. Sodomy being the worst creation of this mess that we could see. Now, continuing on now to verse 70, it says, Revelation 18, come out of her, my people. So the house of Yahweh is pushing this message to come out of her, my people. We do have a city. It's called the city of Israel, and it is for the righteous. It is for the righteous. And we need to be here to help build up this city, and so that this little rock will grow and cover the earth, is what the prophecies tell us. The curse, the plagues, has devoured the earth, and they who dwell therein are desolate. Verse 72. Why didn't they give this man a shot for his flesh-eating critter? They don't have anything that will stop it. And this is where it's ending up. This is what we are faced with. It's the strongest one. They'll probably take some of that stuff and create another one, another pesticide to kill something else, and put it in the earth too. And then they'll be recalling the watermelons and saying, hey, this thing is full of this. So in other words, as the ball comes down the mountain, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and more confusion. In verse 75, it says, but here we see, notice it closely with me now, and it will come to pass that he who flees from the noise of the fear, and he's mentioning here, he says, this verse that we're going to be reading has to do with the firmament, but a lot of people miss it. Okay? He who flees from the noise of the fear will fall into the pit, and he who comes up from the midst of the pit will be caught in the snare of the window. Of the windows? Of the windows. This is the same thing that Job tells you about in speaking astronomy, teaching astronomy. For the windows from on high are open. That is the firmament. The windows from on high are open. Now, I won't go into this meaning here and what opens, but I can tell you what is taking place is the feedback that the scientist was talking about a while ago. They can't do anything with it. They're saying here, take it. You take it. You sent it up here. Take it back. We can't do anything with it. And the foundations of the earth are shaken. This is speaking now of the earth and, of course, the firmament that surrounds it. The foundations of the earth, as Job said. Then Pastor spoke about a couple things. One, the ant, and the other, the grasshopper. And it's interesting how he puts it. He says, he set in verse 83, he set the lesson before heaven and earth. He said, see, I've set before you heaven and earth, which means heaven, the heavens, and is the beginning, the beings, maybe even the microorganisms are looking at this. They have a lot more knowledge than you think. You know, if you think of what Yahweh put in the tiniest ant, and you see this little old ant that's running around, you know, picking at your food that you dropped on the floor, and his head is not big enough to have much of a brain at all, you know they're only about an eighth of an inch long, but you see what that thing is doing, and he never gets lost. He never gets lost. You know, he gets his food, and he can make it half a mile back to his den, wherever his den is. Or he, if he sees there's too much, he'll build a new den closer. You know, this little sucker is smart. You know, and just spread that out to all of what's going on and their whole colony and so forth and so on. And then he talked about the grasshopper. I'm kind of out of time now. But Yahweh is truly magnificent, and he is giving us this understanding. And brethren, we should be grateful, thankful that we're in the house of Yahweh and that we're here. And that Yahweh has given us protection and given us a promise that we can rely on. Praise Yahweh for that. If you all please stand. Let's raise our hands to Father Yahweh. O great Heavenly Father Yahweh, this is your servant, David Yosef, Levi Hawkins, coming to you in unity with the body of priests in your house, and as the seed of your servant Yisrayl, the last day's anointed witness, we come before your throne by the authority of your Son, the Honorable Yeshua Messiah, who is High Priest, King, Ruler, and Judge over your house. We thank you, Father Yahweh, for your great plan of salvation, and thank you for your calling. Thank you for this message that you have called us to. We ask you, Father Yahweh, to help us to overcome. Forgive us of any wrongdoings that we have done, and help us, Father Yahweh, to be determined to become just like you, to strive for perfection. And help us, Father Yahweh, to be humble in your house, and that way we will be able to enter your kingdom. We thank you so much, Father Yahweh, for your protection, and we thank you for your love, for your blessings, and for your guidance. Father, in the name and by the authority of your Son, Yeshua Messiah, we ask you all these things. Hallelujah, Yahweh. Praise Yahweh.